So I have to say that I never really did believe in ghosts until we moved to the house that we live in now.
The first experience I had was when I had just turned 14. My father had died in a heart attack.
When I was left alone in the house that I grew up in, and during that time I experienced hearing voices, banging sounds.
When Jane was born, she slept in our room for the first 3 months in a little bassinet, and she was the perfect baby. She slept all the time. I mean, she was great. But the minute we moved her into what was her room, she was waking up all the time. And it was weird because she hadn't done that in our room at all. Because I'd never actually seen anything. All I ever heard were these sounds, but I could never see a physical thing to confirm what it was.
I used to have like this big dresser, and you know, like those like porcelain china dolls? Like, I've never liked those. Like, I've always thought they were like really creepy, and the one that I got actually was from my cousin, and I like never wanted it in my room because I always thought it was like so creepy, and so I'd always take it and I'd like throw it, like I just like put it in hiding spots, and somehow like the next day it would always end up back in my room. And like I've told people that, and they're always like, oh, like it was probably your brothers, like they're probably just playing jokes on you. But I don't think that, because like I'd literally find spots that like nobody would know where they were, and like somehow like the doll would always find its way back, like always would be like sitting upright and like just staring at me.
We were just goofing around at dinner, and I said, oh, you know, who believes in ghosts? And Annetta, our au pair, said, oh yes. And I said, oh, that's good, because you have one living on the 3rd floor with you. Kind of kidding around. And she said, you know, I really need to talk to you. And I said, oh, okay. So we got the kids squared away, and I said, what's going on? She goes, why did you say that to me? And I said, well, you know, when we moved here, we'd always hear sounds, but since you moved in, I've always attributed all those sounds to you being up there. And she said, well, I've seen the ghost. And I'm like, what do you mean you've seen the ghost? She said, well, I have, you know, the door on my room, it latches when you close it very soundly. I'm a really light sleeper, and I woke up one night because I heard the door open, and there was a man there, and he looked friendly, and I just thought, well, they've got a security system on the house, and you guys always have so many workers, like maybe this guy's legitimately supposed to be here. And I was sort of out of it, and he just smiled at me, and then he turned and he closed the door and walked downstairs, and I could hear him walking downstairs, and I didn't talk to him, but I saw him. I'm like, oh my God, why didn't you say anything to me? And she said, well, I thought you would think I was crazy, so I didn't want to say anything.
Just turned 14. My father had died in a heart attack. We were at the funeral home. Now, it's not something I said to him with my words, but I thought it in my mind as he was laying in his casket. I asked him if he was all right, if he can give me some sort of sign that he was all right. Then I wouldn't worry about him anymore again after that. And just at that moment, the lights in the funeral home blinked on and off.
We had our cafe in Riverside. As soon as I saw the empty space, I just had to have that space. I had hot tea on one of the tables. Well, I had it far back. It wasn't even close to an edge. It was far back. My daughter had called me in the other room, and I'd walked into the other room, and I came back, and in the middle of the floor was my tea cup turned upside down, and just a little splash mark that went around that. Now there's no way it could have made that just in that little area. It would have hit the counter, it would have flipped a different way, it would have spilled a different way. And I called my daughter and she looked at it, she says, "What's that?" I don't know. This is where the tea was and this is where it ended up. It was right smack dab in the middle of the floor.
There was a time that I walked through a hallway and there was like a plaque that I got from my dad for Father's Day, and it was hanging on the wall. And I walked through the hallway one day when nobody was home and it like flew off the wall. It didn't hit me, but like it felt like it's falling off the wall towards me was congruent with me entering the space.
Throughout my entire life, I have had relatives that have passed on come, and actually once they saved me. I have had them move things on me in my house, and this has been since I was very, very little. It started at the age of 5. My earliest experience was actually through a dream where my grandmother's sister came to me in a dream. And in the dream, I was 5 years old, standing at her bed, and she was lying down and her husband was next to her. And she turned to me like this in the bed and said, "Michelle, I'm dying." And I woke up, told my grandmother, and 30 minutes later, her sister had passed away.
I laid on the bed and I woke up and it was well after 11 and I was shivering as I was lying there in my underwear and I was just cold, and it was too lazy to turn the air conditioning down and get up and turn it down, and so I said, "I'll get it in a minute," but I was really cold. And then the next thing I knew, I went back to sleep and I was on my back when I woke up and I was warm, but I couldn't move, and I looked over, I couldn't even hardly move my head, and I looked over at the clock and it said 12:01. I always remember, it was just after midnight. And I said, "What in the world happened?" I tried to look down. The bed was made around me up to my neck, military style. All the comforter was back up. I don't sleepwalk and it would be impossible to tuck my arms in underneath that. It was made around me up to my neck.
I was exploring an old abandoned house that was close to a restaurant where my dad worked. So I went in there often. Every time we would go to pick him up or drop him off at work, I would go into the house, and it was pretty safe to walk in. And my mom was usually somewhere around, so that I was semi-supervised. And we were leaving, and I kept telling the ghost was named Walter. Everybody, it was like a local legend that, you know, everybody just referred to the ghost as Walter. So I was like, you know, I really want to see you. Where are you, Walter? Come on, you know, I want to see you. And I think I just asked so much and was so open to it that one day when we were leaving from the car, I saw a man leaning out of the upstairs window, like the attic window, and I saw him, like I thought he had both hands on the window ledge and he was leaning his body out, looking at the car, and his head was turning as we were driving away, but his body was completely white and he had no face. There was just a blank slate where his face would have been.
I know a lot of people will say that when it happens when they're little, they're afraid. It's the one thing, I felt concern, I've never felt fear. For me, like I said, it always seemed to be something that was trying to warn me or protect me. There was never anything malevolent.
By the end of that first year, I was ready to move. It was that uncomfortable. So I would say, from that standpoint, I mean, it impacted in that I was able to fix the situation, but if I really felt like I couldn't have resolved it, I think we would have moved.
You want to hide it, but I don't totally hide it. I've shared a lot in some circumstances where it was pushing a threshold because people aren't ready for it.
I've definitely shared it with a lot of people. Some people are very skeptical and don't really believe it, but some people are very interested in it and believe it, and they kind of think it's like true and everything. I don't know like why some people don't and some people do.
Mother never really understood it, but she said to me one day, I think whatever you have skipped a generation, because I don't get it, but your grandmother did. And it was interesting because my grandmother used to come to me in dreams all of the time. And then when I got older, she was a heavy cigarette smoker because that's what they did during her days. It got to the point where every time I would smell smoke, I would make money. Cigarette smoke. I would make money, and I would smell it and no one would. So my family, my grandmother for all intents and purposes understood. My mother didn't, but nobody ever said, that's ridiculous, you don't know what you're talking about, are you crazy? I'm lucky, I never got that reaction.
My mom has had some experiences. Actually, my dad's had some experiences too, but they think it's really cool.
You know, I never really believed in any of those things, but because I actually lived it, I feel like, yeah.
Even after that experience with my father, I wasn't sure that it existed. And even when I started investigating with teams, I was still very skeptical of it all. But the more I would investigate and the more unexplained things that would happen, I started to believe more and more.
Everyone who knows me kind of knows that this is so not what I would be thinking, that even if they were skeptical that there could exist, they totally believe that it does now because I'm telling them what happened. I think just because I'm not somebody who would buy into that, but I'm telling them about a real situation that happened that I think more people now believe in stuff like that than didn't, only because it happened to someone they knew and they trust me.
Just because someone's not in a physical body that you could see and that you could talk to one-on-one, touch, doesn't mean that those spirits aren't people. They still have a soul. I'm not afraid of it anymore. When you don't understand something, it seems like everybody's afraid of some things they don't understand, and especially when you can't see something.
I think in a way, like having like this supernatural experience and having these not like relationships with the ghosts, but like seeing them and hearing them, I think it kind of makes me like a little more okay with dying, because it's kind of like there's something else after you die.
Being a host of a ghost tour, I get to share my stories with many, many people. And some of them I'll just see the one night. Others have become, my friends that I talk to all the time. And, I get many different reactions. There are some people that I work with in other fields who don't really believe in this kind of stuff, and they think I'm a little crazy. But then, usually in my group and my friends, we all share similar stories and similar beliefs.
I think it's definitely changed like how I feel about like death, probably because like I've always been kind of like nervous about dying.
It's made me highly intuitive. When I get a thought that something's going to happen, or I should be somewhere, or I should go somewhere, or many times again in a dream, someone will come and tell me something. I dreamt once that the brakes went out on my car, and the very next day I went and had the brakes looked at, and it turned out that there was a part of the brakes that had snapped. Another time I actually heard someone say to me, "Don't go over there." And I decided not to go over to this one particular location, and someone that was standing on the street was hit by a car. So there's no doubt in my mind that those things affected my decision making. They affect how I conduct my life. It's not everything, but I listen to it when I see it, hear it, or feel it.
I have always lived with the knowledge that there is something else out there, something that cannot be explained.
It made me look for answers ever since then.
I think I kind of had to experience it for myself until like I really believed in it.